If there is anything that we're saying that you have questions about, or if you just want to talk to us because you want to be our bestie, we want more besties.
Yeah.
So send us a DM. Send us a
Well, maybe
whatever.
you extroverts do, but
I'm good with who. I'm good.
Friends. So like, actually, I'm pretty sure I'm the only extrovert. So great. I'm gonna have all the new besties.
I like new friends.
I have enough.
Hello, welcome to episode 2 of season 3 of the Light and Salty Co podcast. Although, even though it's episode 2, kind of feels like episode 1 in that it's meeting number 1 of Bible Book Club.
Yeah.
Right?
I think you're going to end up getting confused at like 56, 57.
At some point, it's going to be like,
As soon as we hit the double digits, it's over.
Welcome back.
Hi.
Yeah, but it is the first meeting, the
Genesis.
first official meeting. We should have a handshake.
That's great for a podcast that people listen to audibly.
No, it's good.
They're gonna be like, "What is it?"
Yeah, that's right. You got to guess that.
You
No, it's
learn
gonna
once
be-
you've
you have
read
to
all
watch
the
the
books.
video.
Or this is why you have to follow us on Instagram
Yeah.
and YouTube.
On YouTube.
Are you saying we have to record a video now
Yes.
of us doing the handshake?
Now we got to make a
We gotta make a handshake. Okay, so many things.
Well,
Okay, to the topic at hand.
yeah.
Genesis.
In
This
the
is the book that
beginning.
most Christians have read. When they start with, I was going to read
I'm gonna read the Bible.
Everyone's read
They've read
Genesis.
this one 50 times and the
Yeah.
rest of the Bible
Yeah,
9.
Exodus,
I
like,
mean, it's a really
handful.
good one.
is.
Genesis,
Yeah.
as a story, it's
stories.
robust. It's
Yeah.
awesome things happen. I enjoy it.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens.
There's
in
a
Genesis.
lot that happens.
Yeah, but like we talked about in our last episode, we're gonna first go over because we're starting a brand new genre because obviously this is meeting number 1. So we're gonna talk about some things to be keeping in mind as you read, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into Genesis. So first is you're gonna hear us talk. Hopefully we'll remember to talk throughout every episode how important context is. Heidi mentioned last time the Bible is not written to us, it was written for us. And so for us to accurately understand what's going on, we have to understand everything within its proper context and what the original reader would have understood, what the original author wanted them to understand. And so there's some things that you kind of want to just like keep in your back pocket as you're reading through. This doesn't matter what book you're in, doesn't matter what genre you're in. You're going to want to look at things in their literary context, in their canonical context, and then in their redemptive history context. So I know that sounds like what are those even real words? But what that means is like in the literary context, what you want to keep in mind or kind of be paying attention to is like what in this text, in this writing is standing out to me. So are they using the same word over and over again and repeating words? Is there alliteration? Is there something that's being compared and contrasted? Is there repeating phrases?
Yeah.
You'll see that in Genesis, like this happened and there was morning and night on this day kind of thing over and over. Paying attention to like if there's like a really weird word that you're like, oh, I want to dive into that. Places that pop up a lot, people, things like that. Like what the actual text is saying is what's standing out to you. So pay attention to that.
Can I just add something on that?
Sure.
quickly?
Yeah.
It's just kind of makes me laugh because I remember like reading it when I was younger and being like, that's a random detail. Like, okay, weird. Like, or like getting into like, obviously this is later on the epistles with like Paul would be like, I, Paul, am writing this with my own hand. I'm like,
With your own hand.
Cool.
Oh, that's neat. I write with my feet.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that detail.
cool.
And then when you realize there was like letters circulating around that were pretending to be
Pretending
him.
to be him. Yeah.
So it's like things like that where you're like, that's a random detail. No, nothing.
No,
like
it all
there's
matters.
like
Nothing
even if
random.
it's like weather or there was a famine in the land, like pay attention to those things because that will
kind of
teach where
what's
yeah.
happening.
If there's a therefore,
What
what is it there for? It's connecting the previous passage
Yes.
with that current
That's right,
passage.
yes.
So look around if a verse confuses you, look around it to
Look
the verse
around,
before and
yeah.
after,
Yeah.
or the paragraph before or after.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then canonical context. So what does this say? Like, in relation to other parts of the canon. So that means like, for instance, we're going to talk really quickly here about Genesis being written by Moses, and he wrote a couple other books in the Bible. And so it could be, how does this fit into the rest of Moses's writing? Or how does it fit in the rest of the narrative stories? How does it fit in the rest of the Old Testament? How does it fit in the rest of the entire Bible? So that's what canonical context is. So paying attention to, like, if it reminds you of other places, as we go along, there's going to be stories that we hit within the Old Testament where you're like, wait, didn't we go through this story already? Yep.
It's probably important.
And God was thinking the same thing in Israel. Did you learn this already? Yeah. Does it kind of keeping that question in your mind, like, does this remind me of anything else that I've read in the Bible? And then redemptive historical context. So the entire Bible, start to finish, is like a story arc of God redeeming his people for his glory. And everything fits somewhere into that redemption arc. So it'll be paying attention to things like, does this remind you of anything you've read in the Gospels? Is there anything about this that's pointing to Jesus? We are going to point out a couple of those things for you in each book of how it points to Jesus. But yeah, those are the contexts that you kind of want to keep in mind just to help anchor you a little bit.
Yeah, and even with the canonical one, like to just remember that, like, the Bible does not contradict itself. So like if you're coming to an interpretation that is something like contradictory to something else you've read, like, how does what you're learning fit in with the whole? Yeah. Because it's very... Yeah,
it doesn't contradict itself. So there are places where if you're not paying attention to context, it feels like it does. Yeah. Like it feels like a direct contradiction. And so knowing it doesn't contradict itself, if that's the interpretation you come to, either the Bible's wrong or you're wrong. And I know where I'm going to put my money.
Chances are, yeah. So like, yeah, we are blessed with having both testaments. So like New Testament is very helpful with understanding Old Testament. And
because the New Testament quotes the Old Testament very often, but in the light of the New Testament, so it can help you understand some of the confusing things in the Old Testament.
And that's, like in the last episode, Heidi, you kind of touched a little bit on the fact that we all have biases. Yeah. And biases aren't inherently bad, but we want to be aware of them and try and remove as much as we can. But that is one bias that is almost good in the fact that, like, when we're looking at this, none of the people that were originally reading this had Jesus and the cross to look through for that. Like we have the benefit of seeing how it all plays out, and they're like, they're just waiting and hoping. And so as we get obviously further into this and closer to the New Testament, we're probably going to talk about how, why so many of the Israelites and Jews didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah. And it's because when they're looking at the things that we're reading in the Old Testament, they didn't have the answer already. And so it can feel like it's going to point to something very different, and Jesus would look very different. But and so Genesis is the start of the narrative books, which essentially is just like stories, right? It's the story. So when we're reading narrative, we don't want to look at it as a historical textbook or a scientific textbook. That's not what it was for. It's also not something that you want to go and just like look to, like, what's the moral of this story? Yeah. You really essentially read it as if you were watching a movie, like just like go through the plot.
That's
and the
why
characters
I like Genesis so much, because it actually plays out.
It's quite the action packed.
And again, remembering it's like not everything written in the Bible is meant for us to follow. Like it's descriptive, not prescriptive. So it's like there's a lot of crazy stuff
just
that obviously
because the Bible records it doesn't mean God endorses it.
So we have so many of those sayings.
I know, we're like, we need to make some t-shirts.
Merch.
So keep that in, like you said, it's stories. So just read it as a story. And yes, there are some things that are like,
you're gonna learn, you're gonna read that and be like, oh, that
didn't turn out so good.
Yeah. Shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have done that. Moral of the story. But like overall, you just want to read it as a story. Yeah. And allow yourself, this is something I'm not very good at actually, but like allowing yourself to like feel the feelings you're supposed to feel. Like if
Yeah.
something horrific happens, feel horrified.
Yeah.
Feel like, like it's not.
It is
don't-
real history that way in
don't
the sense
just
that these
read
are
it
real
like-
people.
Yeah. Don't read
Yeah.
it like a textbook though, of just like this, like removed, distant
Emotion
sort of
from
like,
it,
just
yeah.
like, oh, this is just information about how we got here. Like there is
It's
stuff
still
to
the
be
story of
learned
what God
in-
is doing.
Yeah.
So like you're reading historical events, but also what God is doing in them. So you're like,
Yeah.
It's not like any other movie, and it's all not like any other history, but like it's
Yeah. And the thing is like we hear this all the time and it's just it's not correct. Is there isn't a God of the Old Testament and a
Right.
God of the New Testament.
Yeah.
God is the same as he was, is, and will always be.
Yeah.
And so when we're reading about these things, it's not something that is distant. Like he's not like that anymore.
Right.
He wouldn't, like, though he's a different God now
Yeah.
that the cross has happened. That's not true. He's the same as he has always been. And so this idea that what he's doing, like present tense, active, like it's not stuff that we're so distant from. So just keeping that in mind while we're reading narrative, and that'll be for the next quite a few books, I think. Yeah.
And again, just to keep in mind too, it's like, yes, it's a historical narrative, but you'll notice there is poetry within it. So there are sections where usually in our current Bibles, they'll kind of like
put them in.
it'll look differently. The text will
Yeah.
look different. It'll look more like a
Yeah.
poem, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
kind of
in a paragraph,
out, and it's like centered.
So
and,
so again, keep in mind, so if you're interpreting off of those passages, interpret it as if it is a poem or a song. So it might not be as literal. So even within this historical narrative, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go looking for the hidden meaning. And also when we're talking about like context really helping you see things in the Bible, it's not like the Bible is this like secret mystery and you need to have all of this before
you have to have the code to be able to break it.
Right.
And,
But there are certain things that context helps us to make sure that we're not coming out with like wacky interpretations. And it also is like, it makes it a lot of times like, oh, that's so powerful when you know the context. So it's not like you're like, we're inviting Bible Book Club is not a secret club where you get this secret knowledge to understand it. It just helps the Bible come more like, so like don't have to look
So
for
I
hidden.
I should cancel the Gnosticism merch.
Yeah. Sorry. That
guys.
line is not going to be. But yeah, so when you're looking at it, you don't have to look for a hidden meaning, but you can just like enjoy as the plot develops and look at the character development and
see like the author does things like use irony and they build the suspense and they the way things are laid out in certain books, like it is to like
they were
bring
storytellers.
They're storytellers. Like,
and they had a purpose.
I mean, they didn't have TV back then, so
Yeah, well, and also back then it was like verbal.
So
they would literally.
So it was
like they're telling these stories,
and they were like commanded to tell these stories so that they remembered where they came from, right? So,
and again, that's why too, like people were like, oh, well, then that's not really reliable. But we have to remember, in a culture, in a time that they didn't write everything down, they were very good at memorizing.
Particular about it.
Very, very
willy-nilly.
No, they were careful and they were very accurate at memorizing things. So it is reliable, even though it wasn't necessarily written down from the beginning.
Yeah. All right. So
Should we
we're
get
going to
into
go
some
into
of the-
Genesis.
Okay.
What's going on there?
Okay, so I'm going to give a few little details that will help you, as we've said before. We want to kind of get our mindset. Check yourself.
Before you wreck yourself.
Get your mindset in the original readers is who we are calling them. The people that would have read, like we said, these were actually books written to real people or told to people. So the author is traditionally known as Moses. The Torah is often referred to as the Law of Moses. Moses is a pretty big deal in their history. It was most likely written around 1440 to 1400 BC. And the original readers are the Israelites after they came out of slavery in Egypt. So you kind of have to like fast forward your mind a little because that happens later in Exodus. So just remember, like, the people you're reading in Exodus are the people that are reading
Genesis was
Genesis
made for.
So we're gonna learn about the mindsets of what they would have been dealing with as they're listening to it. So the people that are reading this were the slaves who just got rescued out of Egypt. They'd been slaves in Egypt for 400 years and they had no identity. Like, I mean, their identity at that time were Egyptian slaves.
Yeah. 'Cause that's many generations of
Yeah,
It's
like
not, nobody would have remembered what it was like
Right.
before slavery.
yeah, and back then, like your identity is all like wrapped in your language. I mean, it still kind of is to this day, but like wrapped in your language, wrapped in like the stories that you pass down and that kind of thing. So for 400 years, like it doesn't take long for your culture to kind
Your
of
mindset,
shift.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for 400 years, they lived in another nation. They would have only known Egyptian culture, religion, and the Egyptian worldview. So their mindset would have been very similar to the Egyptian mindset. And so God was instructing Moses and Aaron to lead them to the promised land. So that's why, like, for example, when they immediately want to make a golden calf, like, I know you're like, that's weird. Like,
What?
where'd you get, like, hard left,
Yeah.
you know?
Wait a minute.
But for them, they were used to seeing these Egyptian gods in the form of like
Statues,
animals or
yeah.
something that they could worship. And so when Moses goes up Mount Sinai and it's like, he's not coming back, they're like, oh,
We need
shoot.
something.
Like they thought like he's our leader. He's who we're following. He's God kind of in a
Yeah,
way because they're
yeah.
used to Pharaoh being
Yeah.
considered God.
Yeah.
So when he doesn't seem to be coming back, they're like, we need to make another one. So that's why they make the calf. So if you don't understand where their mindset is, I mean, not that it justifies what they did, but like you understand where they got to and how they got there.
Well, and understanding their mindset, you're right, it doesn't justify it, but it also puts into perspective how we might be doing the same thing today because you're like, oh, I understand how they got there. And that's why I sometimes worship this or sometimes worship social media or
Right.
sometimes, like you
Yeah.
don't think to yourself, I'm worshiping these
Right,
things, but
absolutely.
like, yeah, you turn to other things because we understand their mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And so a major reason why Genesis was written was to show the Israelites, like, this is actually who you are. This is the God that created you. This is what he mean. Like, this is what you mean to him. This is how much he loves you and wants you to be like
You're
having
his
dominion
people.
over the animals, not worshiping them, right? You know,
Your purpose.
yeah. And so he's revealing their true identity to them and like setting them apart as a nation, as his people. And so that's why, like, we talk, we'll just briefly mention this. Like, a lot of times people argue over the creation account because they're going to it with a wrong objective. You're going to the creation account to just see a blueprint of how the world was created. And that was not the intent of why Moses wrote it.
Right.
He wrote it to show the people coming out of slavery, this is who created the world. This is how you were created. And this is, you were supposed to have dominion and like reign with him. And like, this
Be
is
priests.
Yeah, be priests.
Yeah, like a-
And
yeah.
like, and also to show like, this is how God is going to be with us and like redeem, like that kind of thing. And so it was never meant to be
It's never
a
meant to
textbook
tell you if
or
the
a science
if the world is millions of years old or if it was 7 literal 24 hours a day. You're free to believe either one of those,
because-
and neither of them came from the Bible.
exactly.
Because that wasn't what this.
Yeah,
that wasn't what this was recorded for.
Right. It was
So,
to show like God is supreme. He spoke things into existence. He created you. He made you in his image.
yeah.
Um
I
And again-
actually loved when the first time I heard you teach that the context that it was for slaves coming out who didn't know their identity, because that was years ago. And so for me, I felt the same as the New Age world is very much slavery to
Yeah,
all of the
right,
things,
yes.
right?
Yep.
And so it's like, wow, I'm basically coming out of slavery.
right.
And to read it with the idea of this is how God's trying to tell me who he is and who I am just gave a whole different lens even to
Right.
maybe that's why I love Genesis too much.
Yeah.
Like getting goosebumps as I
Yeah.
talk about it. But it was such a special thing to that who are you? This,
Yeah.
like, this is what Genesis is telling you. It's
Yeah.
not
It's our
Because you
origin
live out
story.
of who you
it
think
is,
you
it's our
are.
Yeah.
origin story.
You
It's
live
our
out of
origin,
so every decision you make is based
based
out
on-
of it's rooted in who you think you are. So if you think you're a slave,
Yeah.
you're gonna
act like
you're
that.
gonna act like
Yeah.
a slave.
Yeah.
And so
And so something that it's good to think of is the creation account is a truthful account. It's just not a complete account because
Yeah.
Moses was not interested in being
he wasn't
like
writing
science.
science textbooks.
yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't how this happened.
it
It's
was
what,
this
yeah,
is this is what God did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think even too when we talk like when authors spent a lot of time talking about something, that's something you can pay attention to is like, man, is he going on about this? It was like
It's important.
to
Yeah,
him.
they're emphasizing
Yeah,
it for
and
a
so
reason.
like I think I often always thought that creation took up so much of Genesis, and it's literally like
it's the first two chapters,
first
yeah.
two chapters.
50 chapters,
And you're like,
yeah.
oh wait, that's it.
Yeah, hold
And then
on.
you realize like, oh, and so it's just like to show like, and also too like the other like the pagan nations, they have their own creation stories, and so it was like they would have been growing up listening to that, and Moses is like, no, this is
And
the
all
truth.
of those ones typically had like wars between gods or like,
Yes.
and whereas God's like, nope, I just spoke and it happened. Like it's just this
Yeah.
authority that he has that is like not even comparable to any of the other gods that they worshipped at that time.
Yeah.
Right, and it's even like to the way that it like kind of like parallels with like the first and the fourth day, like how it's
If he creates and then he
Yes,
fills
yeah.
it.
he creates and
fills.
fills, creates and fills. The
Yeah.
way, and what we talked about before is because they're telling stories, right? So it's like to understand that, to understand how to read the creation account. I think people get caught up in the details and they're like, well, that can't be, God can't be
Yeah.
real because this and that. And it's like, once again, as Aaron said, you can come to this conclusion, you can come to that conclusion. When it comes to creation, the most important thing is that you understand God created.
It's who created,
Yeah.
not how and
Yeah.
when. Like, because the thing is like, I don't want to get too far into this because this could get real confusing. But like, so the Israelites, we call it ancient Near Eastern. So A&E, if you ever see it in a book. The way they consumed stories and literature and things, they looked at things more cyclically.
Right.
Cyclically, is that the word? In a circle. Whereas we're like start to finish, we're linear in the Western. And so even the creation account, it was like he created these things and then we come back around to the beginning and he filled those things. Whereas we like to see start to finish. It's the same with the 10 Commandments. We read them start to finish in a list, whereas the first commandment is actually very much related to the last commandment, and because it kind of comes around in a circle. And so not to go too far into that and confuse everything, but it's just like, it's seeing the fact that they consumed and understood things very differently than what we do. And so when we go with our Western 2025 eyes and are like, no, it says there was, this is a day, this is a whatever, that's not the point. So
yeah, so I just have a few like mindset things to keep in mind when you're reading, and then we'll move on. But so most likely the original readers, once again, slavery is all they knew. So how did we end up as slaves? Has God abandoned us? Are we being punished? Is God angry at us? Is God the only God? How is our God different from the Egyptian gods? How do we worship God? How can I please God? What happened to the covenant? Why is there evil and suffering? Where's our heritage? Who are we? Like, these are all the things that they didn't know because they were never given that. And so
that's part of being a slave is we strip your identity. Right?
We take it away from
take
you.
it away.
Yeah.
So they had no idea.
And for
any of
them
this
to
stuff.
be God leading them into a land that they're going to have their own nation and
They
they needed to
know.
have a foundation of,
Yes.
we're actually called to have dominion and rule and
and like build them back up, like to
Yeah.
be defeated for so long and to be like worthless in
to be like,
Egypt's
no, I
eyes.
chose you.
Yeah, and so a major reason Genesis was written is to show the Israelites, this is how you were created. This is your God. This is what you did to him, what you did to him.
Yeah.
And this is what he does to be faithful to his promises to restore.
Even though you did that to him.
Even though you did that to him. And
Yeah.
their identity is still his chosen people, which I think just shows so much beauty in God's character already. When we talk about like God of the Old Testament, it's like, you guys, he's so amazing.
He's
like,
so
we
amazing.
suck
The
in the
God
Old
of the Old
Testament.
Testament is
God
just
is
as
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
which kind of leads into like some of the themes of Genesis.
Yeah.
And so one of the main themes is God's faithfulness to people who are unfaithful to him.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, right from Genesis 2, we are, or Genesis 2, not 3, Genesis 3.
3 is when we
right, with the
screw it all
fall,
up.
right? Where it's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
and right away, God clothes them and
Yeah.
and I think we talk about this in one of our previous episodes, so I'm not going to get too much into it, but just God's compassion towards Adam and
Yeah.
Eve and like,
Yeah.
even in kicking them out of the garden, like no one wants to live forever if you're sinning.
If you're not with God.
Yeah, if you're not with God. So, anyways, and just throughout, like so the book of Genesis follows, us up until I guess 11. That's more the creation and the beginnings of the earth, the events of the earth, where it's like God's hatred for violence and evil and his justice and mercy to those who are faithful. But then when we get into the patriarchs, so starting with Abraham, this is where God is starting his redemptive plan. Well, not starting, but he's initiating it with
rolling it
Abraham.
out,
Of, okay, from your descendants, I will bring about the Messiah, the Savior that you actually need. But again, all of these people who God calls faithful and righteous, they still make massive mistakes. And so, it's just showing, they choose not to trust God. They choose to try to fulfill his plan in their own ways, which, I mean, I feel like we all do ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like anytime that you are trying to meet a need or anything outside of God's ordained way, you're falling into this. But
Yeah, can I just say, praise God that you are the same God as you were in the Old Testament? Thank you for still being faithful to the fact that I am not faithful all the time and I screw up, and you're still like, okay, I'll clothe you again.
Yeah. And the
And
thing is too, it's like God doesn't save people from the consequences of their sin. Like,
Right.
Abraham tries to go his own way and fulfill the promise through Hagar.
Yeah.
And have a son outside of, God said it was going to be Sarah. He tries to do it his own way. And he has to live with the consequences of that. There's a lot of hurt and a lot of damage within those relationships that happen. But God still faithfully provides, or he lies about Sarah being his half sister. But but God still blesses him, and like he gets blessings out of that, from the anyway. So it's just story after story. Or I mean, you come to Joseph and his brothers sell him into slavery, and God uses it for good. And so again, it's all these human sin leads to evil and injustice, but God always redeems it for his purposes and for good. And so that's like a major theme to look at, is like when you're reading through Genesis, is just the time after time, the accounts of God's faithfulness, even when his people fail, because he's faithful to his promises and he will fulfill them. And another theme to kind of look at is just covenants. And so you'll start to see there's the the covenant with Noah and Abraham. And so you'll see throughout the book that there are different covenants that God is making, and they're usually one-sided.
Yeah.
So, even with Abraham, Abraham, to make the covenant, they typically in that day and age, they would cut open, if you were just to make a covenant or like a promise or like a deal with another person, you would cut open animals and like put half and half on either side, and you would both walk through. And basically what that is saying is like, if I don't hold to this covenant, this is what's going to happen to me. Like, you will cut me.
Right.
And when God makes that promise to Abraham, he alone goes through the middle of this thing, basically like, I will hold to this promise, even if, if you don't, I'm going to make this come to pass. And so that's another thing that you can be looking for, is the different covenants that are made.
To that? This, how do you pronounce it? Suzerain.
How do you spell it?
I don't know that either. Suzerain covenant with it's like that was like a typical covenant with like the leader, the ruler, and the people. And so that's like they would follow the base of that. But when they were making those covenants, it would be the lesser one that would walk through. And it would be like, I'm going to do this to you, the lesser one, because you're probably going to be the one to break it.
So really it should have been Abraham going.
And so then it's so beautiful to show that like God, he is the greater one. And he's like, I'm going to walk through.
Yeah, that's so good.
But I think too, just another thing overall is just the brokenness that comes from sin, right? That choice from the garden to choose what's right and good in our own eyes versus trusting God. And it's just the outworking of that. And I mean, again, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in Genesis that you're like, yikes. And again, it's not prescriptive, it's descriptive. Because again, when we are left up to our own desires and our own ways of making things work, it usually ends up hurting other people, hurting ourselves, leading to damage. And again, thankfully, God can redeem those things. But those are some of the, I don't know if you guys have any other themes that you want to point out.
Oh, one thing I'll just add, I just thought of this. I'm in a group at church, and in this group is a fairly new Christian. And so her perspectives are very refreshing, because kind of like how Shanna was talking about when she first came out of New Age, like this feeling of finding her identity. This other person she didn't come out of New Age, but I think all of us were in slavery at some point to something else. And she came out. And so she's still like trying to discover what certain words mean and kind of like looking in definitions, and something that like even though like logically I could have probably got there and realized what the word meant, listening to her say she went and looked up the word redeem because she's like, I really want to understand what that means. And it literally means rescue. And I was like, to now start thinking like when God is redeeming, he's rescuing. Every time he comes in and he rescues us and he rescues creation and he's like rescuing all of us. And I just was like, it just makes
Love that.
it makes it so much more beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how does Genesis point to Jesus?
Well, let me tell you. Not all of them.
Not all of them. We want you to start picking things out.
We've got a big list, but I voted that we should discuss this in the podcast because I thought it was fun when I first read through Genesis to find the nuggets that Heidi had talked about. So I'm going to share just a couple with you.
Yeah.
So one of them, so Genesis 3:15, that's where we have the promise of Jesus coming to destroy the devil. And that's where, again, it gets more poetic when you're reading it. But there's so many things in there, from it being the seed of the woman to the injury to all of that. So yes, enjoy Genesis 3:15 is the best. Then also when you go through chapter 17, so this is now we're talking about Abraham. We've got a miraculous birth there. Can you think of another miraculous birth that happened?
Does it remind you of?
Then we go to chapter 22 and we've got the sacrifice of a son. So these themes that keep going. So throughout the scriptures, we have all of these connections from Old Testament to New Testament. And so it's neat to, like, where have I read this before? How do I know this?
And also like keeping in mind that this is one of the reasons why the Bible is valid and true is because it started, Genesis 3 is when Jesus was first promised and like those prophecies were fulfilled. And so there's so like, it's just such a like when you really get into like the nitty gritty of the Bible, you become a Bible nerd because you're like, all the ways that it like overlaps and it points to this and it points to that. You're just like, whoa. So,
or even if you look up the Bible connections between the old and the new, I've seen this a million times, and it's these arcs that go back and forth and back and forth.
Graphic with the
for some reason, looking at it on Thursday was the first time I realized it can look like a rainbow. I was like, oh my gosh, it's not just all connecting, but when the colors are actually connected, it forms a rainbow, and it's God's promise, and it's just so good. So good.
I just remember when I was in Bible school, like, and we always had to write like a timeless truth out of like, we would go through scripture, we would look, okay, what was true for them, what could be, a timeless truth. And then we had to write like an application over. And I remember when I was going through Genesis, God is faithful made it into every chapter, right? I'm just like, God is, and I remember one point I got annoyed. I'm like, oh, this is so boring. Like every single chapter of Genesis, I'm writing this. And then God's just like,
you're faithful.
But it's like, God kind of convicted me. And I was like, Chelsea, you should be grateful every single time you get to write that down. Like this is just proving my character over and over and over again, that I'm faithful.
Good. All the time.
Shout out on marijuana.
Sorry, I was just in my notebook. We didn't talk about saying this, but key verses for each book. These I like to actually just highlight in my Bible. So for this one, it would be Genesis 3:15, as we've just talked about, and Genesis 50:20.
50.20. Yes.
So I have a special color just for highlighting key verses.
Same. Yeah.
And that'll help you unlock the meaning of the rest of it.
And again, there are some Genesis has some difficult passages in it that have different theories. And we're not going to touch on that in this episode. Things like the Nephilim, who were they? Again, the creation story, the fact that Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son.
What kind of a horrible God would ask to do that?
Just a little touch on that. Like in... again, use the New Testament to explain the Old Testament. So in Hebrews, in the Hall of Fame, and I think it's Hebrews 11, when it talks about Abraham, it does say he did it knowing God could raise him from the dead. So that could be like, okay, is that what Abraham's mentality was? It's like, oh, if I sacrifice to God, like he could actually resurrect him. Right. And so again, just that's one, way to look at it, but there's a lot of difficult passages and we might touch on some of them on our Instagram. So keep looking there.
And
but
also it's Bible book club, right? So let's be conversational. So if you're seeing a reel where we're posting about things or this and that, write us a comment.
Send us a DM.
If you see us in real life, come talk to us. That's been so special. I meant to say that in the last episode. That was one thing that's been so special to over the last little while is how many people are coming and talking to us about it. And we love that. So if there is anything that we're saying that you have questions about, or if you just want to talk to us because you want to be our bestie, we want more besties.
Yeah.
So send us a DM, send us a,
Well, maybe
whatever.
you extroverts do, but
I'm good with
Shannon's
who.
got
I'm
no
good
friends.
So cool. Like, actually, I'm pretty sure I'm the only extrovert. So great. I'm gonna have all the new besties.
I like new friends.
I have enough. But I like talking to the
Heidi and I
Bible. We
will
don't have
be
to
your
be friends, but I'll talk to the
Chelsea
Bible.
and
with you.
Shannon will just wave at you from afar.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the first.
That's
book.
Genesis.
Oh my
and
gosh,
we're
I'm
still over
excited.
30 minutes, but I mean, we did talk a lot at the beginning about context, which we won't do.
And
So
narrative,
in our
yeah.
promise
Narrative.
to you that we will keep these shorter,
The next ones will be.
we
Next
will.
one will be short.
We will.
Yeah.
And if we fall short, sorry, we're not God. We don't keep all our promises.
Yeah, we are faithful. Yes.
This is not a vow.
This is not a covenant.
I'm not going to kill the first thing that comes out of my house if I break this. Okay. Well, have fun reading the first book
Genesis.
of the Bible.
Woohoo!
And then come back next week.
Bye.
Bye.